Asterisk the haunted mansion. As I stepped out of the car and onto the crumbling driveway, a shiver ran down my spine. The mansion loomed before me, its towering spires and turrets reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. My name is Emily, and I'd inherited this monstrosity from a distant relative I'd never met. The lawyer's letter had been cryptic, but the promise of a vast inheritance had been too enticing to resist. As I approached the mansion, I noticed something odd. The windows were all boarded up, and the front door was covered in cobwebs. It looked as though no one had lived here for decades. I pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the stench of decay. I coughed, covering my mouth with my sleeve. As I looked around, I saw that the interior was just as neglected as the exterior. Furniture was shrouded in dust sheets, and the walls were adorned with faded portraits. But it was the staircase that caught my attention. It curved upwards like a ghostly ribbon, vanishing into the darkness above. I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. Something was watching me. As I stood there, frozen in fear, I heard a faint whispering in my ear. It was a soft, raspy voice, and it seemed to be coming from all around me. "Welcome home, Emily," the voice whispered. I spun around, trying to see who was speaking, but there was no one there. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "Get out while you still can." I knew then that I had to explore the mansion, to uncover its secrets. I took a deep breath and began to climb the stairs. The whispering grew fainter as I ascended, but I could feel eyes upon me, watching me. I reached the top of the stairs and saw a long, dark corridor stretching out before me. I fumbled in my pocket for a flashlight and turned it on. The beam of light illuminated the corridor, revealing cobweb-shrouded portraits and dusty candelabras. As I walked down the corridor, I noticed that the doors to the rooms were all slightly ajar. I pushed open the first door and saw a bedroom, the bed covered in a thick layer of dust. But it was the next room that made my blood run cold. It was a nursery, filled with antique toys and a beautiful, ornate crib. And on the wall, in letters scrawled in red crayon, "They're waiting for you." As I stood there, frozen in fear, I heard a faint creaking sound. It was soft at first, but grew louder and more insistent. I turned to face the staircase, my heart pounding in my chest. The creaking grew louder still, and I could feel the vibrations of footsteps through the floorboards. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness above. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. She began to descend the stairs, her movements slow and deliberate. I tried to step back, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she stopped and regarded me with a cold, calculating gaze. "Welcome to Ravenswood Manor," she said, her voice low and husky. "I've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The woman's eyes seemed to be hypnotizing me, drawing me in with an otherworldly power. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on a dusty old bed, my head throbbing with pain. The woman was nowhere to be seen, but I could sense her presence still, watching me from the shadows. I knew then that I had to get out of Ravenswood Manor, to escape the clutches of the mysterious woman and the dark forces that lurked within these walls. But as I stumbled out of the bedroom, I realized that I was lost in a labyrinth of corridors and chambers. The mansion seemed to stretch on forever, its secrets and terrors waiting to be uncovered. As I wandered through the mansion, I stumbled upon a door that seemed out of place. It was hidden behind a tattered tapestry, and it looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I pushed the door open, and a musty smell wafted out. Inside, I found a room filled with ancient artifacts and dusty old books. But what caught my attention was a large, leather-bound diary. It was locked, but I managed to pick the lock after a few minutes of fiddling with it. As I opened the diary, I saw that it belonged to Malcolm Ravenswood, the former owner of the mansion. The entries were cryptic, but they seemed to hint at a dark family secret. I read on, my heart racing with anticipation. The entries grew more and more disturbing, until I finally stumbled upon the truth. Malcolm Ravenswood had made a pact with a malevolent entity, trading his family's souls for wealth and power. The entity had demanded a terrible price, and the Ravenswood family had been cursed ever since. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was trapped in the mansion, surrounded by the vengeful spirits of the Ravenswood family. And then, I heard a faint whispering in my ear. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, trying to see who was whispering in my ear, but there was no one there. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. I felt a presence closing in around me, suffocating me. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. I was plunged into darkness, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the mansion. I stumbled forward, desperate to find a way out, but every door I opened led only to more corridors, more rooms. I was trapped. And then, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was a candle, flickering in the darkness. I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the candle, I saw that it was sitting on a small, ornate table. And on the table, there was a note. It was addressed to me. "Dear Emily," it read. "I've been waiting for you. You'll never leave this place." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was trapped in the mansion, at the mercy of the malevolent entity that haunted it. And then, I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, coming from the floor above. The footsteps grew louder, heavier, and I could feel the vibrations of each step through the floorboards. I knew that I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like lead. Suddenly, the candle on the table flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I was trapped, alone and defenseless in the haunted mansion. And then, I saw a faint light in the distance. It was a figure, standing at the top of the stairs. The figure began to move towards me, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. As the figure drew closer, I saw that it was Malcolm Ravenswood, the former owner of the mansion. His eyes were black as coal, and his skin was deathly pale. "Welcome to my home," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You'll never leave." I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. Malcolm reached out a bony hand and grasped my wrist, pulling me towards him. As I stumbled forward, I saw that we were standing in front of a large, ornate mirror. Malcolm's eyes seemed to be burning with an otherworldly intensity as he pulled me closer to the mirror. And then, I saw my own reflection staring back at me, but it was distorted, twisted into a grotesque parody of my own face. Malcolm's grip tightened on my wrist, and I felt a searing pain as he pulled me into the mirror. As I was pulled into the mirror, I felt a strange sensation, like I was being sucked into a vortex. The world around me began to distort and blur, and I felt myself being stretched and compressed. When I finally emerged on the other side, I found myself in a strange, surreal world. The sky was a deep, bloody red, and the trees were twisted and gnarled. Malcolm Ravenswood was standing beside me, his eyes still burning with an otherworldly intensity. "Welcome to my world," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You'll never escape." As we walked through the twisted landscape, I saw all manner of horrors. Grotesque creatures lurched through the shadows, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. I knew then that I was trapped in a living nightmare, and that Malcolm Ravenswood was my guide and tormentor. But I refused to give up. I knew that I had to find a way out of this twisted world, no matter what horrors lay ahead. And then, I saw it. A glimmer of light in the distance, a beacon of hope in the darkness. "Malcolm," I said, my voice firm and resolute, "I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to escape." Malcolm's eyes flashed with anger, and he reached out to grab me. But I was too quick. I dodged his grasp and made a run for the light. As I emerged from the twisted landscape, I found myself back in the mansion. But something was different. The walls seemed to be shifting and twisting, and the air was thick with an eerie, pulsating energy. As I stumbled through the mansion, I realized that I was completely disoriented. The rooms seemed to be shifting and changing around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being herded towards some unknown fate. I stumbled upon a door that I was certain hadn't been there before. It was old and worn, with heavy iron hinges and a large, rusty doorknob. I turned the doorknob and pushed the door open, revealing a narrow stairway that descended deep into the earth. The air that wafted up from the depths was cold and damp, and I could hear the sound of dripping water echoing up the stairs. I knew that I had to be careful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn towards something. I began to make my way down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I descended deeper into the earth, the air grew colder and the darkness seemed to press in around me. I stumbled and almost fell, but managed to catch myself just in time. Finally, I reached the bottom of the stairs and found myself in a small, damp chamber. The walls were made of cold, gray stone, and the air was heavy with the scent of mold and decay. And then, I saw it. A large, ornate box sat in the center of the room, adorned with strange symbols and markings. The box seemed to be pulsing with a malevolent energy, and I knew that I had to be careful. Suddenly, I heard a faint whispering in my ear. "Open the box," it said. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. The whispering in my ear grew louder, more insistent. "Open the box," it repeated. I knew that I shouldn't give in to the voice, but a part of me was curious. What could be inside the box? I reached out a trembling hand and touched the lid. It was cold to the touch, and seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. As I lifted the lid, a musty smell wafted out. I peered inside, and saw that the box was filled with a dark, misty substance. The whispering in my ear grew louder still, urging me to reach inside the box. I hesitated, unsure of what to do, but my curiosity got the better of me. I reached inside the box, and felt a chill run down my spine. As I touched the misty substance, I felt a sudden jolt of electricity. The room around me began to spin, and I felt myself being pulled towards the box. I tried to pull my hand back, but it was too late. The misty substance seemed to be pulling me in, drawing me into the box. I felt myself being sucked into a vortex, a swirling tunnel of darkness. I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled and distant. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I found myself back in the foyer of the mansion. But something was different. The room seemed to be distorted, as if it was reflected in a funhouse mirror. I stumbled forward, trying to get my bearings, but every step I took seemed to lead me in circles. I was trapped in a never-ending loop, reliving the same moments over and over. And then, I saw her. The woman in black, standing at the top of the stairs. She beckoned to me, her eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. I tried to run, but my legs were heavy, unresponsive. I was trapped, unable to move or escape. The woman began to descend the stairs, her eyes fixed on me. I could feel her presence, cold and malignant, spreading through the room like a stain. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she spoke in a voice that was like a rusty gate. "You should not have come here," she said. And with that, the room went black. When I came to, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing with pain. The mansion was silent, the only sound the creaking of the old wooden beams. I stumbled to my feet, determined to escape. But as I reached the front door, I found that it was locked. The key was gone. I was trapped. And then, I heard the whispering. A soft, raspy voice that seemed to be coming from all around me. "You'll never leave," it said. I spun around, trying to locate the source of the whispering, but there was no one in sight. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "You'll never leave," it repeated. I knew then that I had to find a way out of the mansion, no matter what. I began to search the rooms, looking for a door or a window that I could use to escape. But every door I opened led only to more rooms, more corridors. I was trapped in a maze, with no way out. And then, I saw it. A small, hidden door that blended seamlessly into the wall. I hadn't noticed it before. I pushed the door open, and a musty smell wafted out. I stepped through the doorway, and found myself in a narrow, dimly lit corridor. The corridor stretched out before me, disappearing into the darkness. I knew that I had to follow it, no matter where it led. As I walked, the corridor began to slope downward, leading me deeper into the earth. I could feel the weight of the mansion above me, pressing down on my shoulders. And then, I heard the sound of dripping water. It was a faint, echoing sound, but it seemed to be getting louder. I rounded a corner, and saw a faint light in the distance. It was a small, flickering flame, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As I approached the flame, I saw that it was coming from a small, ornate lantern. The lantern was sitting on a pedestal, surrounded by a halo of light. And then, I saw the words. They were etched into the wall, in letters that seemed to be made of blood. "Welcome to your grave," they read. I stumbled backward, shocked and confused. The figure standing in front of me was identical to me, with the same face, the same hair, the same clothes. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. Malcolm Ravenswood stepped forward, a sly smile spreading across his face. "You're trapped in a loop," he said. "A never-ending cycle of fear and terror." I looked around the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. But everything seemed distorted, twisted. The figure in front of me began to speak, its voice identical to mine. "You'll never escape," it said. "You'll be trapped here forever." I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled and distant. The room began to spin around me, and I felt myself being pulled towards the figure. As I got closer, I saw that its eyes were black as coal, and its skin was deathly pale. I was staring into the face of my own terror. When I came to, I was lying on the porch, my head throbbing with pain. The figure was nowhere to be seen, but I could sense its presence still, watching me from the shadows. I stumbled to my feet, my heart racing with fear. I had to get out of there, had to escape from the endless night. I staggered back into the house, slamming the door shut behind me. I locked it, bolted it, and leaned against it to catch my breath. But as I looked around the room, I realized that something was off. The furniture seemed to be shifted, the shadows cast in strange and ominous ways. And then, I saw it. A message, scrawled on the wall in blood-red letters. "I'll always be watching." I spun around, but there was no one there. The message seemed to be staring at me, mocking me. I knew then that I had to get out of there, had to escape from the house and the endless night. I grabbed my keys and made a run for the door. But as I reached for the handle, I felt a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but it only seemed to intensify. I could feel eyes upon me, boring into my skin. I knew then that I had to escape, no matter what. I began to search the room more frantically, looking for any possible means of escape. As I searched, I stumbled upon a small, hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, I found a key. I grabbed the key and rushed to the door, unlocking it with shaking hands. As I pulled the door open, I felt a rush of cool air, and I saw a sliver of light in the distance. I knew then that I was close to freedom. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the unknown. As I emerged from the room, I found myself in a long, dark corridor. The walls seemed to stretch on forever, and I could feel the weight of the mansion bearing down upon me. But I didn't let that stop me. I began to run, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I could feel the key clutched in my hand, and I knew that I was one step closer to freedom. As I ran, the corridor seemed to grow longer and darker. I could feel the shadows closing in around me, and I knew that I was not alone. And then, I saw it. A figure, standing in the distance, watching me. As I ran towards the figure, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was terrified, but I knew I had to keep moving. As I got closer, I saw that it was Malcolm Ravenswood. He was standing in front of a large, wooden door, and he was smiling at me. "Welcome," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I've been waiting for you." I tried to run past him, but he was too quick. He grabbed me, holding me in a tight grip. "You'll never leave this place," he hissed, his breath cold against my ear. I struggled and kicked, but he was too strong. He dragged me back into the depths of the mansion, deeper into the darkness. As we walked, the walls seemed to close in around me. I could feel the weight of the mansion bearing down upon me, crushing me. And then, I saw it. A door, hidden behind a tapestry. Malcolm pushed me through the door, and I found myself back in the foyer. But something was different. The room was changed, twisted. The walls were distorted, and the furniture was rearranged. I stumbled forward, confused and disoriented. And then, I saw it. A figure, standing in the center of the room. It was me. I stumbled backward, shocked and confused. The figure standing in front of me was identical to me, with the same face, the same hair, the same clothes. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. Malcolm Ravenswood stepped forward, a sly smile spreading across his face. "You're trapped in a loop," he said. "A never-ending cycle of fear and terror." I looked around the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. But everything seemed distorted, twisted. The figure in front of me began to speak, its voice identical to mine. "You'll never escape," it said. "You'll be trapped here forever." I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled and distant. The room began to spin around me, and I felt myself being pulled towards the figure. As I got closer, I saw that its eyes were black as coal, and its skin was deathly pale. I was staring into the face of my own terror. I was consumed by a sense of dread as I stared into the face of my doppelganger. Its eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and I could feel its icy breath on my skin. Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding flash of light. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes. When the light faded, I saw that the doppelganger was gone, but Malcolm Ravenswood was still standing in front of me, his eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You'll never escape," he repeated, his voice dripping with malice. I knew then that I had to think fast. I remembered the key that I had found earlier, and I realized that it might be the only way to escape. I reached into my pocket and grasped the key tightly. I knew that I had to find the right door to unlock. Malcolm Ravenswood began to laugh, a cold, mirthless sound. "You'll never find the right door," he sneered. But I was determined. I began to search the room, looking for any door that might lead to freedom. As I searched, I stumbled upon a small, hidden door. It was locked, but I knew that I had the key. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a set of stairs that led up to the sunlight. I took a deep breath and began to climb the stairs. I knew that I was taking a risk, but I had to try. As I emerged into the sunlight, I felt a sense of freedom that I had never felt before. I knew that I had escaped the haunted mansion, and that I would never go back. But as I looked back at the mansion, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Malcolm Ravenswood was standing in the window, his eyes fixed on me with a malevolent glare. I knew then that I would never be free from the haunted mansion. The end.